Our guest speaker today is Jim Gambill, who will tell us about inventory reduction in a lean environment and raising an interesting question: is inventory really a waste? Jim shares 30 years of experience, primarily at General Electric, where he was most recently GE Energy's Global Corporate Lean Initiative leader. He has held more than 250 Kaizen events worldwide, pretty impressive. He's been with the continuous improvement practice since 1994. Also, very interestingly and on topic, he has reduced inventory levels from between 20 and 60% while increasing availability and on-time performance. So you can see here a list of his expertise areas. He's also a consultant right now for a number of prominent companies that you see listed here, including Rolls Royce, Shell, etc. So thank you so much for being with us today, Jim. Before passing it on to you, just a few words about our sponsor, SESA Systems. As many of you know, we have a complete catalog of 2,500 products used by 15,000 companies, actually, including many global corporations and thousands of smaller ones, with both training games as well as lean office furniture, workshop furniture, workstations, workbenches, etc., floor racks, trolleys, Kanban systems, floor marking, safety signage, as well as digital KPI management software and digital screens, and visual management with magnetic whiteboards and accessories. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to you, Jim.
Great, thank you very much, Jibril. So one of the reasons we talk about inventory reduction is obviously it's one of the major wastes, but a lot of questions I get on an ongoing basis is inventory really a waste? I mean, we need inventory to make product, whether it's a physical product or whether it's a transactional product. In a lot of cases, people believe that inventory is necessary. The more the better, just to make sure that we get the outputs that we're looking for. So why don't we dive right into it? These are the classic 7 wastes in the Toyota production system. And this is the acronym Tim Wood that a lot of people use to remember the 7 wastes. But inventory is right up there at the top. And as I mentioned, many companies are very reluctant to commit to lower inventory levels. They believe they never want to be able to run out of material. It covers up a lot of issues, I'll say. A lot of pushback you get is our demand changes all the time. Our product mix changes all the time. Our lead times do not satisfy customer requirements. And I also get things like, we have a quality issue. So we need to keep a little extra on hand to accommodate that. Also, a supplier may come to someone and say, hey, I'll give you a good price on something if you have multiples or multiple quantities or high lot sizes, or a price break for an excessive amount of material. Or I'm going to increase my price next month, so you better stock up now. One of the other things I've encountered in my own personal experience is that it typically is not a metric on the producer, on manufacturing, or in the transactional business, the flow of the owner that's processing the paperwork. I've actually had positions where I was considered a inventory reduction manager. And I was the only one that was really responsible for reducing inventory. My counterparts in manufacturing had no interest. So it was kind of an interesting situation to be in. But they see it as a safety net. They see it as absolutely necessary to accommodate all of these reasons that potentially could pop up. And as I said, if they mess something up, or they get wrong paperwork, or they've got a quality issue, or customer changes their mind at the last minute, they've got more there to make sure that they can accommodate the output that they've committed to. So tough situation to be in for the producer. When you go to them and say, we need to cut back on inventory levels. Okay, next slide. So the reasons we carry inventory. As I mentioned, sometimes there are scrap or rework issues. Maybe we have an unreliable supplier that's having some issues, or just, you're at the bottom of their priority list. Sometimes our lead times are just too long. Sometimes that's driven by excessive setups, too many or too long. Our scheduling or lead time issues pop up to the surface. We've got capacity issues. So the flow is not getting through the facility as appropriate. Maybe we have some issues with machining or the producing workstation. It could be a capacity problem. It could be breakdowns. It could be a number of different things. But we got to accommodate for that. Transportation issues, unreliable transportation, either inbound or outbound. These could be potential issues, or manpower. We don't have enough people. We've got some illness issues. So in other words, we load up on inventory to accommodate and absorb all of these things. So you'll see there on the chart that this is a classic scenario, or a classic example that you see many times about the rocks in the water, right? Where the problems are the rocks and the inventory rides over top of it because the inventory inflates and covers up the problems. So we have to address these issues if we want to address inventory levels. You can't just arbitrarily slash inventories and then break the system and disappoint your customers. So the one thing it will do is, if you start to gradually reduce your inventory levels, the first thing that comes to the surface is the thing you have to address first. It tends to be the biggest problem or the biggest driver. So once we hit a hiccup, as we start to slowly reduce inventory levels, something comes up that we have to address, and we go ahead and put some fixes in place, corrective actions in place once we've identified it, solve the problem, and then we continue down the path of finding the next biggest issue. So this is just a graphical representation of how that would work. But we have to make sure that we address them as we find them, and in order to effectively lower the levels as we go. Okay? So how do we, let's talk about finance for a minute. Inventory valuation. A lot of people think that it's really just how much does it cost, or if you machine it or produce or add labor to it, it's just material and labor. There's a couple of different nuances here. Typically, it's a calculation of material dollars, labor dollars, your labor rate and the number of hours. And then there's a percentage tacked onto the labor to accommodate overhead rates. And this is carried in your inventory, so that when you output something, you're inventorying material, labor, and overhead when you relieve the system of the inventory levels. There are also some cases where you may have reasons to put a miscellaneous material factor on the material. So maybe you've got some shrinkage, or you always got an 8-foot rod and you're only using 7 feet. Maybe you just calculate that into the equation in the miscellaneous material factor. So that's the basic valuation of how you decide the value of your inventory. But you can fall into a trap where you think that that's the only cost associated with inventory. So, and this is something that happens a lot in sourcing or procurement, where they look for price reductions. But and they go out there and they say, boy, I got something I can get for a few dollars less, but I got to buy it a little bit more. But what they don't address are some of these hidden costs, the cost of of managing the materials. So there's purchase orders costs, there's inbound transportation, there's receiving, handling, cycle counts, all of these things, head count, lost parts, obsolescence, slow moving costs. So you tie up a lot of dollars with inventory. But a lot of times we don't really look at these additional costs. So inventory is more than just the evaluation of the inventory. There's a lot of indirect material costs and material handling involved with it. Okay? So where do we start? Typically, what I like to do is come up with some kind of a segmentation. If you don't know what you're dealing with, it's very hard to address it. So we tried to do some real basic analyzation of your inventory. One way to do it is to divide it into those segments of active, slow moving, or obsolete. And you set your own parameters. Maybe active is you're using it all the time. Slow moving is something that you don't use for maybe a month or two. Okay, obsolete, you haven't used it for over a year. Or whatever your parameters are appropriate in your business. Another way to do it, segment it, is to divide it into raw material, work in process, and finished goods, if it's appropriate. Another thing we like to do, and this can be done on an individual part number basis or by category or commodity or whatever, to calculate your days on hand. How much do I have? Okay, so I've got 300 pieces of something, but that's a year and a half's worth. Okay, so another way to look at your inventory: days on hand, turnover rate. How quickly are you turning your inventory? And this again is another calculation of how quickly you go through it, how many times per year you rotate your inventories. Or aging. How long has something been in the facility or been in the system? So there's lots of different ways. There's also additional ways to do it depending on your business. But the best thing to do is to figure out where you have inventory tied up. So once you identify the pockets of inventory, you can decide which ones you want to address first. So what we tried to do is establish the causes of these buildups, and maybe try to put in place some solutions and see if they work or not. So we look at the 5 whys, fishbone cause and effect diagrams. Once we identify some potential things, we may decide that it's significant enough that we may want to put together a Kaizen event to address it. And if we do find some fixes that we put in place and then go in and measure to see if it's making an impact. So this is a classic PDCA or Plan, Do, Check, Act rotation. So we try something. If it doesn't work quite right, maybe we readdress it, put in another change in place, and then continue to monitor it and improve it. So some things more longer term. So we may want to develop a certain action plan as to how to do this and what goals we expect to achieve in what kind of a time frame. So a dedicated action plan, dates, names, all those good stuff to hold people accountable and try to address the issues that we've identified. Okay. So some of the things that that we try to do, it's very business dependent. Okay, but the one thing, along with the segmentation thing, is we want to establish a baseline value stream map, so we know exactly where in our process we may have discrepancies, imbalances, inventory buildups. We may want to look at a just-in-time type of situation where you have a very good relationship with your suppliers and you develop a good rhythm with them so that you are getting material when you need it. There's a lot of, let me say, controversy, I guess, about just-in-time. Just-in-time doesn't mean just running out. or just in case, or a lot of the other things they talk about. It's really having what you need when you need it. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I need a little bit of extra of something if that's what you decide to do, but you want to make sure that you're not carrying excessive amounts of inventory to address whatever issues you may encounter. The object is to get it when you need it, use it, and output it. So it's more of a flow type of thing that we have to look for. Another thing that we may want to do is shorten your production lead time. A lot of businesses have an awful lot of work in process. There's batching that goes on. So you're running big batches because you think they're more efficient. And maybe there are gaps between the time it comes from one workstation to another workstation. There's maybe some offline processes. Maybe it goes off-site for a process. But the one thing we want to do is try to minimize the work in process, and thereby getting it through the process much quicker. And that in turn will reduce your work in process. You may want to look at implementing Kanbans. And Kanban systems really just are consumption-based replenishment systems. We all come from a world of ERP and MRP, which are push systems, which tell you when you need it, and they just drive the material in, and hopefully you're on schedule, and you can absorb that material. But in a lot of cases, the material, if you've got a hiccup or a problem, the material just keeps flowing in based upon the item master parameters you've put in place, and material just keeps flowing in and building up. Whereas with Kanbans, you replenish as you use it, real time. And that's really goes hand in hand with converting from a push system to a pull system in manufacturing. We want to try to eliminate bottlenecks. If you eliminate bottlenecks, then your material flows through those areas faster, less WIP. The entire system operates more efficiently. Supermarkets. Supermarkets, very similar to Kanban, but you may have supermarkets of at your supplier that you're pulling from. Shortens the lead time. Instead of having to wait 6 weeks for a manufacturer to make something, if he keeps a few on the shelf for you on the supermarket, you can pull it immediately. On the manufacturer side, you may want to have raw goods supermarkets. You may want to have in-process supermarkets. You may have finished goods supermarkets, so your customers can pull immediately as well. All depends on the situation, but these are very effective, very rigid with rules, not just let's put a bunch on the shelf. It's all calculated out, effective to the demand, and we try to minimize that and replenish things on a much faster basis. So use it, replenish, use, replenish, use, replenish, not buy a whole bunch and then run with it for 6 months. So vendor managed inventory. Maybe that's another option, that where you don't own the inventory, you work out a deal with a supplier where he keeps his material on your site for a little while. There may be some additional agreements that are in place, that after X amount of time you may buy it or whatever. So you have to be a little bit careful on how this is negotiated, but it's very effective. The supplier says, yeah, I'll keep some on your site, and as you use it, I'll charge you. Very common these days. Didn't used to be. Supplier contracts, maybe you go into some long-term agreements with suppliers. Gives them some stability, gives you a guaranteed flow of material. You've got locked-in price and locked-in delivery. So rather than going out there and negotiating all the time for every single order or contract or whatever it might be, you've got some long-term agreements in place. You want to make sure that you look at your parameters for stocking, or your part item master data. Multiples, maximums, minimums, lot sizes, pallet sizes, all those kinds of things. You want to make sure you keep up to date and continually revisit to make sure that Your demand hasn't changed, but you're still ordering based upon old information. So that's an important thing that has to be done on a continuing basis. So inventory, if you can determine standard work, you got good inventory standards as far as what your philosophy is about stocking inventories, then you can put in place rules. And everybody has to run by those rules, and you modify them as necessary as time goes on and things change. Again, we mentioned in-process Kanban earlier, but another thing that we may want to do is evaluate what our ordering parameters are. Are we a build-to-order business? Or are we a build-to-forecast business? Or are we a build-to-stock business? Those are some very big decisions that have to be made. Or you may decide that there are segments within your business where some things are build to order, other things are build to stock, and other things are build to forecast, depending on, the dynamics of the demand stream. So it has to be evaluated, has to come up with a policy. You just don't want to let things run as people decide. As MRP planners, one guy decides one thing, another decides another. They're in conflict. They don't have a common philosophy. So we want to make sure that we have a common philosophy as to a stocking and manufacturing build. Runners, repeaters, and strangers are something that you may have heard before, but runners are things that you build all the time, day in, day out, just always are running them. Okay, so those are very common things. So you can set those up. You got a good rhythm going on those things. Repeaters are things that tend to come in waves, where you may build 20 of something and then you don't build it again for a little while, and then you build a few more. So those things are repeaters. You've got good standard and information on them, but you don't run them every single day. And the strangers are the one-offs, the things that you run rarely. That can be something that is unique to a specific customer, or a design that is unique for a one-time shot. So those things all have to be addressed differently. So there are these ties back. Once you identify whether they are a runner, repeater, or stranger, you can put the appropriate stocking policy or manufacturing policy in place to address them. So again, we were nailing down how this all works together, get our good hands around what we're making, how we're making it, who our suppliers are, what our customers are looking for, and we try to put an effective stocking and inventory strategy in place. Failure to do this will result in much higher inventories to cover over any mix or any issue that may come up. So yeah, so those are just some of the possible lean solutions that could come up. Okay. Each situation is unique. Every single business, it's very hard to plug and play in a lean environment. It's a very hands-on, action-oriented philosophy. So depending on, who you are, what your philosophy is, what your goals are. I will say that sometimes people come to me and say, why do I really want to reduce inventories? Well, if you've got a certain amount of cash available in your business, do you want to tie it all up in inventory? Or do you want to have some free cash to maybe for acquisition purposes? Maybe you want some NPI, new product introduction development, but it's tying up cash that can be used elsewhere. So, it's something's on sale at the store. How much do you go and buy? You go buy a year's worth? No, you buy sort of what you need. And that's the same philosophy, so you can have cash flow to accommodate other things. But only a lean professional can really help you with these types of things. So either you can look for consulting people who have got experience in this area, or you can develop them internally as you go, or hire in. But every experience is different. Everybody's got to be on the same page. And in order to do this, you also need a good influx of support. And one of them is Assessa Systems. They've got great materials available to help you establish lean within your facility. So these things in combination with each other, you can pretty much address anything you want. But the most important thing is a willing organization and top management buy-in. And I'll leave you with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much for also your kind words about the equipment at CISA Systems. I'll show you our contact information again on another slide. Before we move to the concluding slides, just a couple of questions. The first is, you did mention why companies consider or what they can benefit in terms of inventory reduction, but one of the concerns that manufacturing companies have is they hesitate to reduce inventory. Could you tell us more about that hesitation and how to address those concerns that they may have?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ways, but typically the way this works is that your senior level management, their balance sheet looks out of whack, and we've got way too much inventory. We're only turning our inventory 2 times, right? So the edict comes down because they need to free up cash. Manufacturing, or whatever your business tends to be, even if it's transactional, like I said, tend to think that this is beneficial to them to have as much as they can. So there's a couple things. One is that I think you have to drive the accountability down to the manufacturing entities so that each portion of your business owns their own inventory. And then they have to be engaged in putting in place programs in order to drive the inventories down. So ownership, responsibility has to be driven down to the people who are actually controlling the inventory, not somebody who's just been put in place to try to facilitate. So I think the other thing that has to be understood is that lower inventories makes things easier, not harder. If you've got less inventory, then you know where things are, they flow through the shop faster, things just operate more smoothly. Whereas if you've got stuff all over the place, very hard to find stuff, keep track of things get bogged down. So you've got to incentivize them to want to drive their inventories down. But again, top level engagement, drill down on the metrics to the people who actually own the inventories.
And follow-up question: the total cost of inventory, like you mentioned in one of your slides, is much higher than what it appears at first sight. So even on the balance sheet, they're seeing a number which may appear large. The reality is that the real cost is even larger. So do you have a sense of what that ratio is between, what the apparent cost of inventory and what in your experience, is a real cost once you add up all those extra losses, hidden costs plus the losses in efficiency?
Yeah, I've never really seen that calculation, and I think it probably is business dependent. But I would venture to say very easily it is more than double, probably well in excess of that. I mean, I have seen places that carried so much inventory they had to lease additional space, racking, people to manage it, fork trucks, all of these things. If you total all of those things up and roll them somehow into your inventory cost, it would be astronomical. Yeah, very high, very high.
Right. Sounds like a first step could be an assessment of what the actual cost is, and that can also help build some business case for making this a big initiative.
Right. I think I think a really good starting point is to do a high-level value stream map of your business, so you can look at your lead times, cycle times, inventory levels at different phases of the thing, just as a high level thing. Then you want to drill down into more detailed segmentation as appropriate too. But you got to identify those pockets. You know, we've got X amount of inventory, but where is it? We always seem to be running out of stuff. Okay, so where is it tied up? And then once we figure out what those are, we can address them individually.
Great. All right, thank you so much, Jim, again. The presentation we have today was part of the SESA Systems Academy, which is a physical space where executives from different corporations can come and check out equipment. Some of it pretty simple, but that can make a big difference, like what Jim mentioned, Kanban systems or floor racks for lean supermarkets, etc. Some a bit more advanced, including the digital KPI management. And few hundred executives join the physical space, but we also have several hundreds like you who join online. And if you'd like to hear more about our webinars and be informed of our future webinars or listen to the prior ones, you're welcome to join our LinkedIn group. We have almost 2,000 members now, of peers like you, no spam. You can ask questions, but also simply track our webinars. So you can find the group at linkedin.com/groups/ this number that you see here, 860-5844. And if you're interested, also feel free to reach out to get a copy of our catalog, either PDF or paper, which is many, probably more than 15,000 of your colleagues have the catalog on their desk. And also happy to schedule online demos. So if you'd like to get in touch with Jim, you can find him on LinkedIn, by email, or on his website, and you have my contact information here as well. Thank you so much again, Jim, and I look forward to seeing you all in a future webinar. Bye-bye.